While many of us follow the Dow as an indicator of how U.S. stocks are trading, it is just one of many indexes that investors use to track the market as a whole. In this morning's U.S. Bank Economic 360, U.S. Bank Vice President and Senior Portfolio Manager Mike Denneman joins us to discuss a couple of the other popular indexes and what they tell us about the market. Mike is with Business Courier publisher Jamie Smith in the studio.
Thanks, Peg. Mike, as always, thanks for being here.
Good morning.
Even though we talk about the Dow all the time, it's not the only index out there, right?
No, it isn't, and you're right. You know, we do focus a lot on the Dow. In fact, we talked about it just last week. But when we do, we always throw in that caveat that while it is a popular index, it might not be that informative because it's such a narrow index, has only 30 companies in it of all the stocks out there. And of course, they're very recognizable blue chip companies, household names, and so that's why it gets a lot of its notoriety. But it's that very small sample size that perhaps makes it not the most enlightening of all the indexes out there. So that's why there's a few others that we follow closely, the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, for instance. These are broader indexes that provide a little bit more information.
We'll talk a little bit about the S&P 500 then.
Sure. So perhaps the second most popular behind the Dow, the S&P coming from the initials of the index's founders, Standard & Poor's, and then 500 naturally being the number of stocks in the index, although actually there's 505 in it right now because of a technicality, but we'll stick with 500. And that number is important because clearly it's a much larger number than 30 from the Dow. So much better diversification in terms of the number of stocks, in terms of the number of industries. So a very broad index, more indicative of how the market as a whole may be doing, although it is still a very much large cap type index, same as the Dow. So in fact, you'll find all 30 companies of the Dow are among the 500 in the S&P.
Okay, well, what about the NASDAQ? What does it do? What does it add?
Sure. So the NASDAQ is maybe the more, the relative newcomer of the bunch.
Rookie.
Yes, exactly. And it's a little bit of a different animal in that it follows stocks on a specific stock exchange, the NASDAQ Stock Exchange, one of the two primary exchanges in the U.S., the New York Stock Exchange naturally being the other. Whereas the other indexes we've just mentioned select stocks from different exchanges, the NASDAQ focused only on the stocks on the NASDAQ. And so to put that in a little bit of perspective, I'm going to make a very broad generalization here, but perhaps people might consider the New York Stock Exchange to be kind of the buttoned-up granddaddy of the exchanges. A lot of blue chips, maybe a little stodgy, whereas the NASDAQ cultivates this image of being an innovator and the upstart and a lot of new economy type companies.
So when you're talking about innovation, is what you're going to kind of use that for.
Think stocks like Tesla or Netflix. And so while again that's a broad generalization, there is some truth to that. For instance, the NASDAQ has almost 40% of its companies in tech. So it's a very tech-heavy index. There's a lot of biotech, medical companies as well. So again, a lot of innovators out there. Also a very broad index because it's incorporating all the stocks in that exchange. There's more than 3,000 names there. And it goes a little bit beyond, too, the large cap focus of the Dow and the S&P. So we've got some large caps, of course, but then also mid caps and small caps as well. So the indexes we're speaking of this morning, it's by far the broadest. Although, as kind of a closing note of interest, despite the disparities in these indexes, there are a handful of companies that sort of bridge all three of them. So Microsoft, Intel, and Cisco Systems.
Those little ones, huh?
Yeah, that are, you'll find them in the Dow, the S&P, and the NASDAQ. So interesting. They're innovative enough for the NASDAQ, but they're stodgy enough.
Well, as always, your knowledge and of the industry is awesome for our viewers as well as for me. So thanks again.
Thank you.
And we look forward to talking to you soon.